So everyone who's joining us on YouTube and the people who are here, आज क्या करेंगे? What we'll do today is we'll pick up 4 questions which are the least attempted question of this year's paper. ठीक है? This year essay paper had these 8 questions. ठीक है? This was a small poll done in the letter and spirit community, which most of you guys would be part of. And this question, truth knows no color, thought finds a world and then creates one also. Muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone, and the ears teach much which days never know. These were the least attempted questions, and there is a reason why that was so. This question, best lessons learned via bitter experiences, is very similar to a PYQ question. So most people attempted that. Similarly, in the section B, contentment is natural wealth and it's best to see life as a journey and not as a destination. These are questions which have been often repeated again and again. Okay. Not a disadvantage of attempting these questions is that everyone is going to attempt this. So what will happen is, unless you have really good examples, really good arguments, reflections are really tight, you'll be writing same cliches which the copies behind you have also written. So there is no way your answer will be differentiated from the rest. Okay, that's a given. So if, and this is true for any GS question as well. If you find a question is easy, if it looks easy, so there can be two things. One, either it's deceptive. It looks easy, like social media and its disadvantage in democracy, or social media and its ethical challenges. It looks easy because it's on a topic we keep hearing every day. So by default, our mind will jump to answer with something, fake news, propaganda, this and that, right? And we'll not structure it properly. And we might miss a technical detail, which that question presumes. So wahan to you have no option but to attempt it. In the essay paper, right now when you have time before you start the prelims preparation, right? Try to ensure that you capture the maximum out of it. So what we'll do now, I'll come to this slide later, but I'll tell you that these 4 questions are connected to each other. And this is what we'll see for the first time before I take you in the depth of these things. These are the questions. Truth knows no color, thought finds a world and then creates one. Muddy water is best. You know the questions. Now, truth knows no color and thought finds a world and then creates one has a common theme. वो common theme है कि it is all about your mind's relation to reality. How do we know the truth? ठीक है? And the thought which finds the truth, or the thought which finds the world, if the world is external to us, how does it make sense of the reality? ठीक है? There is this common recurring phenomena which अगर if you reflected well, you will figure out कि ये एक recurring chain है. So this is how it's connected. Now this question with this question, and these are all questions in the same year, by the way. ठीक है? Thought finds a world and creates one too. Muddy water is best. This is about our mind's role in creating clarity. So there is a truth out there, and I'm starting today as this human being towards my journey to whatever that idea of truth is. But how is my mind going to help me or prevent me to reach there? Okay, same. There is a muddy water, and should I restrain myself from making sure it gets more muddy, or should I just do something, add an active ingredient? It's my mind that is going to basically guide me the first. Okay, and then muddy water and the ears teach which days never know. आ जाए ये क्या होता है? Muddy water and this question has one important role of time. If muddy water is left alone and if it gets cleared, क्या होगा? Time के बाद it will get resolved, right? That's the assumption. Any conflict will get resolved within time. This is what it's saying. Ears, मतलब someone who's has wisdom, someone who's old, that has all the years of wisdom with him or with her, and they would know better which days when you're just acting, hustling, आज क्या करूँ, कल क्या करूँ, वो नहीं बता पाएगा तुम. ठीक है? ये connections हैं which when we go through the whole, we'll discuss these 4 PYQs, and these are the toughest of the PYQs which very less people attempted this year. When we go through this all, we'll come back to this again. तो तुम इसको और ढंग से समझ पाओगे. Now, I wanted to do this, the whole thing about learning, हम समझते कैसे हैं, ठीक है? So there is a framework which we teach in essay program at Civilsdaily. That framework is called the TAS framework: thesis, antithesis, synthesis. I say something, I propose something, and you might have an objection to that. So there are a lot of buts which you might have. That depends upon how much knowledge you have about that subject and your intuition. Okay. Then comes the point if you're able to articulate your objections, right? So your antithesis will be fleshed out. और जितना deep जा पाओगे उतना better होगी antithesis. And then comes the synthesis part. Synthesis is not like a middle ground. Rohit is also saying right and you're also saying right, let's do something in middle. It's not that. Synthesis is basically now, after all these arguments back and forth, where do we go and solve for it? What's the next big thing which is coming? जिनके PSI or optional है, you would have either read about it or you'll read when you read Hegel and Socrates and you'll read about dialectic thinking. उससे derived है. But ये framework is not that easy to master. And I'll show you how a beginner answer of a question looks like and how a topper answer differentiates. The reason why this framework is not easy to master is because of the way we study. And this is whole UPSC education and even school and college. Most of us, we give a lot of time in remembering things. And that's the thing, that's your base. You have to know things. So you have to remember it. We jump to a one-pager note, which ranker ka kisi Telegram group mein hoga and वगैरह, and we get a ready reference. So we collate all these things. Understanding is basically the next step where we explain, like we explain to our nephew or a niece. Okay, this is what it means. Okay, it's still a lot of words. We explain without jargons. We try to explain without jargons, and that's when we know कि अपने को समझ में आया कि नहीं आया. Simple language, and we spend bulk of the time here. By the time you're closer to mains, if you keep carrying on the way you're carrying on, you will be able to apply the concepts as well. What basically will happen is you'll remember a principle and you'll remember an example. So one dimension you'll remember and one example you remember. In mains, in the Smash Mains program, you'll be taught DAE approach in the body. Dimension, argument, example. So argument hatao, D or E tum kar loge. Dimension and an example which sets the dimension. Okay? This is where bulk of your critical thinking develops, and this is the toughest thing. This is where argumentation comes in. And argumentation doesn't mean that zabardasti critique karne ka. And I hope everyone who's there on YouTube, you're able to follow me. Argumentation means you're able to look at the assumptions underlying the statement. Okay? And we'll see it. And assumptions underlying ko jitna tum fine tune karte jaoge na ki if you're saying truth knows no color, you're assuming a lot of things. You're assuming that that's an easy thing for all of us humans to interpret, but I don't see that happening. I don't see that happening in these themes. Right? Now you're actually probing deeper. Then comes the evaluation wala part, which basically means so what? It's a great framework, so what? This happened, Indian-China trade mein ye hua, so what? Is it such a big deal? Which newspapers are making it out to be? You try to prioritize what they are saying. In some way, you'll use your old judgment, your whatever existing knowledge, your analytical thinking जो यहाँ पे develop की, and you will try to prioritize. ठीक है? ये बहुत important है. It's not just for the essay, it's for everything that you're doing with respect to mains. This is called Bloom's taxonomy. A lot of competitive exams are actually based on this only. So when UPSC folks are setting papers and when they write directives, they're basically trying to see what kind of mature thinker you are. Okay, now we go to the first essay topic. I'm assuming no theoretical knowledge, nothing at all from anyone. Tum batao, what are the first things which come to your mind when you hear this? First things.
False doesn't have legs.
False doesn't have legs. Okay. But ये कहाँ से आ रहा है? Where are you remembering this from? What quote? Movie. What's the full quote? Acha. There's another quote which says कि false or falsity travels the whole world before truth starts putting its shoes on. Truth basically wakes up slightly late. बराबर. Okay. किसी को भी. Whatever you think of, and I don't need any structure. What do you think? What example do you remember? People on chat, you can also type. कोई example, कोई slogan, कोई quote, truth पे. Any Indian leader who said anything around Satya, truth. You've read Gandhi. You've read Satyamev Jayate. These are the first things which will come to your mind. Okay? And that's okay. To begin with, that is okay. That's how it should come. To begin with, जो thesis होती है ना चीजों की, which is basically, हाँ ये सही कह रहा है. This makes sense. I agree with this. And so you start thinking or listing down the first things. Now you're at the level of remembering and understanding. So you basically will just paraphrase this. Truth knows no color. It is universal, colorless, and valid for all. These are simple next explanation. and you write it in your own language. Okay, very basic stuff. You'll remember Gandhi ji Satyagraha. You'll remember Martin Luther King, Truth Beyond Skin Color. You'll remember the basic things. जो coloration will make you remember. Okay, color, race, that is going to come. Okay, now depending upon your optional and depending upon generally कितना सही से पढ़ा है, you'll remember some examples. Abraham Lincoln, when he fought for slavery, right? You remember these things. Ashoka after the Kalinga War. Socrates वाला भी हो सकता है. You'll remember thinkers. What about Socrates? Yes. Correct. So these are like first ideas which will come. Okay, these are beginner ideas which will come, and they're okay. Right now they're okay. These are not what you're going to take to the exam. Okay. Same, you should always remember this thing. Science is the biggest apparent thing where facts apply to everyone. Gravity applies to everyone regardless of caste, creed, sex, gender, right? Everyone. Scientific phenomena across generations, same. Fine, same phenomena, same. Same for maths. Those rules are same, right? And so therefore, you know, maths is closest approximated to truth, the way you would read agar padha ho to. Okay? Right, okay, on YouTube people are right, yeah, we're not restricted by boundaries, अनेकात्मवाद. You've read that, वो पढ़ा है वो, but वो अभी आगे चल के आएगा इसमें. The elephant and you touch the leg, पढ़ा है ये वाली philosophy में पढ़ा है. ये सब आने चाहिए. All of these you should remember as you go through it. Okay? And if I then ask you, ये तो ठीक है यार, can you counter this? Can you counter the truth knows no color thing? So basic you would think, yeah, I can. You know, it's often hidden, it's attacked, there are propagandas, you know, and then you will remember all these things from your history. ठीक है ना? Which basically there was a truth, someone did a propaganda, and then a lot of us suffered, etc., etc. And so many, I mean, your general knowledge and your current affairs will give you a lot of answers. Colonial powers, they justified, what was the term they used? बताओ.
They are on to civilizing.
White man's burden. You should remember these things. All of these at one level should be like at your fingertips. Basic stuff, basic jargons, basic stuff. Okay? I'll show you why it will not hold much later, but that's the base. Social media, itna pad rakha hai, that should come in. Okay? These are the basic bedrock of antithesis. But still, because the way right now we are at the understanding level only, right? Basic. This is application level, thoda bahut. Yahan pe you're applying. You're thinking of, no, truth is colored, where all, you know, you're thinking of politics, social media, whatever, right? And then you say, yeah, but eventually, you know what, truth wins in the end, because this is kind of a moralistic gyan we keep hearing. Right? Satyamev Jayate, we keep hearing these things, right? So at the surface level, we are able to think about this essay. At the surface level, we can do a little bit of justice to the essay. And we've known how corruption scandals then get exposed. It takes time, but eventually, finally, things are all fine. And that's kind of a moralistic gyan which people give. Some people also say Vasudev Kutumbakam and whatnot. Okay? But ye beginner hai. Okay? As you start going deeper in your optionals or in the essay classes, you know, when we teach, this is how your thesis would look like. Okay? And I'll tell you the fundamental changes which are now happening. What happens when you gain more control and more command on subject now? You will start thinking in terms of categories. You will start organizing things. If you would have seen in your GS1 paper, I think there was a question on Akbar syncretism, right? There's two ways to answer that question. You can keep listing the points, remember the like whatever, or you can group those things under some heads, right? Trade, politics, day-to-day affairs, administrative affairs, how it percolated. Whenever you organize something, it gives me a sense of maturity in the audience, in you. Okay? We listen to those speakers who are able to bucket things and then prioritize them. This is 1, this is 2, this is 3. So now all those basic thesis points which were true will now be bucketed. How will you bucket things? There were some principles which were true across cultures, right? Justice, compassion, and then agar Kant padha hai to categorical imperatives of Kant. These are true across cultures, across the time. So when you write a sentence like this, when you basically say, okay, you know, if I have to think about justice across time, किन के नाम लूंगा और बोलूंगा कि टाइमलेसनेस इज देयर एंड दैट इज गोइंग टू सिग्निफाई दैट ट्रूथ वाज टाइमलेस. ठीक है, दैट्स अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग. सो तुम्हारी जो नेक्स्ट लेवल राइटिंग होगी ना, दैट विल इंप्रूव लाइक दिस. Now we will not just drop examples like GS topics. Now we will try to basically connect them under single buckets. ये thesis में करना होता है. Thesis is still very simple. Everyone can write a good thesis with some practice. You just have to start bucketing things together. अलग अलग नहीं. Then you have in social and political realm too, right? You have Declaration of Human Rights. These are the same things. Wherever human rights were stressed upon, pick up those leaders, club them together. ठीक है? Basically what I've done is truth across moral. Moral is basically what's right and wrong. Political, I don't know, यहाँ पे social also you can take across social. I've just clubbed things together. In science is also the same thing, right? And now you're basically expanding on what it means. वहाँ पे what we did in basic thesis was we just said truth is colorless, impartial, same for everyone. Here we have said it doesn't matter who discovers it. It holds independently truth across time. ठीक है? With these extra words, some more words in a sentence, what we've done is we've told the examiner that I know the essence of what you're saying, the timelessness of truth which is holding across. Abhi I am justifying this thing. So that's the first part of my essay. That's a thesis. Okay. Then I start going into the antithesis. The way to think of antithesis is think of all the buts which come in your mind. Okay. You see, listen a statement and अंदर से आता है यार सही लग रहा है मोटा मोटा, but there is something which is missing. Those are your buts, and this happens in life. This framework of thesis, antithesis, synthesis is not just for essay; it's for life in general. And when the better you are at exploring those buts, can only happen if you're good at finding the assumptions on which that's lying. Okay? If I say a statement to you, truth has no color, and you're telling me, you're assuming that that is how it actually operates. You're assuming that ये अच्छी बात है जो आप बोल रहे हो, that is exactly how the world works. It doesn't work like that in practice. That's your assumption. You're assuming that truth has no color, ये बस सुनना ही रह गया था, and then I'll start operating that. नहीं, you know how my mind is already conditioned so much. How if I even try to go towards truth, basically remove my biases and cognition, how difficult it gets. You have no idea about that. These are your buts. These are genuinely your buts to any person who's giving ज्ञान. ठीक है, अच्छी बातें कर रहे हो बट XYZ. ठीक है? Yeah. This, if you have this critical thinking done right, you'll be able to get through all the newspaper BS that you read. ठीक है? All of those things are rhetorics, and we'll come to that. There are philosophers who worked on this. There's a lady called Hannah Arendt. I don't know if you've heard of it. You've heard of her? Hannah Arendt said the politics and truths, they can never exist together. Banality of evil. What was banality of evil? ये नहीं पता. ये मत करो. Because what you will do, you'll end up dropping this. Hannah Arendt in Banality of Evil showed that truth and politics cannot exist together. And this is like a style line which will give you some marks but will not get you the maximum. What she said was that the people who suffer the most are not, she was talking about the Nazi regime, and she was saying the people who suffer the most are not the Nazis or just other people. It's the common public. Banality of evil means evil is so common that you don't even raise your head or raise your ear or eye कि हो रहा है. हाँ, you say like ऐसी तो होता है. This is how it is. This is how life is. That shuddered her. Like, what the hell? Because in that Nuremberg trial, someone said, the other people who were part of them said, we were just following orders from our superiors. The whole mass of German army was just following orders. And she's like, are you serious? Where is your internal compass? So truth and power in politics. Because truth is a simple fact. Power wants narrative. Power wants that creative. which आप न्यूज में देख रहे हो. Anyway, let's get back to this. So truth, अब ये समझना, ठीक है? Truth appears colorless, like the statement says, but in practice, and this is an important point, in practice, in its expression, in execution, the way we can see, in the practice, we find that expression looks colored across the category. Look at even Gandhi, and across the category means doesn't matter अच्छे के लिए हो रहा है, बुरे के लिए हो रहा है. Even Gandhi, when he had to put out his Satya, the Satyagraha thing, he had to make sure that he understand Indian ethos and Indian context, right? If he would not understand and he'll give a high-handed theory, no one will follow. It will not become a mass movement. So he had to get to the principles of what? Ahimsa, tapasya, and all these things, discipline. He had to live that life. So even if you have to live the truth for the right cause or for the right reason, it has to be colored by the cultural context. अब ये line जो है, it's not a rocket science line. You understand that? This is what adds nuance to your antithesis. ठीक है? There's no heavy vocabulary here. There's just thinking to one extra level. That's what you need. ठीक है? Social truths, you know, right? Martin Luther King. And the statement is basically a statement from that revolution. If it was so evident to everyone, Martin Luther King wouldn't have had to speak these lines. Whatever the truth of that era is, has to be given social sanction. Therefore, revolutions have to be fought. You see a lot of this in PSIR and all these things. Therefore, these things have to be fought. So, तुम्हें very simple lines, you have to write these things. That is called adding the argument on your DAE. Okay? Within the antithesis, this is like adding argument on everything. Your personal truth, ये भी तो होता है. It's clouded by emotions, right? But you very strongly believe in it, right? Be very strong. I hope everyone on the YouTube also understands this, right? You very strongly believe in it, and if someone argues against that, you will vehemently defend yourself. Until unless some time passes by, you cool down, your muddy water is just down, and you see the things clearly. But that's how it is. It's mediated by your emotions. Okay? So what it's saying is that truth might be colorless, but in expression, it is mediated. Mediated matlab I can see through, I can feel through only by language, emotions, and my human psyche. Second point, path to uncovering the truth is not as simple as it may seem, because like I said, the cognitive biases are there, right? There are power filters. You live in a society, media hai, narratives hai, you're part of that. You're bound to get stuck in that. Social cost, that's a very important thing. You might be speaking the truth, but you would be ridiculed for that. Galileo Galilei was killed for, right? People had to die for standing up to truth. So the Socrates, find more other people in the modern times. So truth is colorless is all fine, but if you start practicing it or in the expression, there is a lot of social cost attached to it. And these are things you would have felt in your life or seen around. UPSC wants you to write them with the analytics. ठीक है? Beginner और anchor के आंसर में फर्क लग रहा है? दिख रहा है क्लियर फर्क? ये देखो. The antithesis here was just example dropping. Same examples, but just dropping. I did not go into the why. Why could Hitler do that? Cognitive biases, propaganda machinery, hai. Nothing. Why does it impact you? Nothing. But you have dropped all the examples. When you come to this level, now you're able to defend your examples. Simple words, but you're able to show to the examiner that this is why it matters. Is it making sense for everyone? Abhi yahan pe? Making sense for you also? ठीक है?
The nationalism versus patriotism का भी example दे सकते हैं.
Yes.
कि nationalism में कोई लोग कलर नहीं जानता, लेकिन जो देशभक्त है वो जानता.
Yeah. Nationalism versus patriotism में you can also invoke Tagore.
जी. उन्होंने तो criticize भी किया.
Yes. Tagore, if you read about Tagore and what he said about freedom of thought, and if you read about his poem Gitanjali, poem number 36, I think it is, read that poem, you'll feel so invigorated. Padho usko ek baar. So true, you can, what you do here when you add these lines, right? Nationalism versus patriotism. Yeah. Nationalism versus patriotism. This is a simple thing called comparison by contrast. You're comparing two things which look very similar to each other, and now you're defining what the difference is. It's a very, very, very powerful analytical tool in language. Wherever you're able to compare and contrast two things which look very similar, knowledge and wisdom, insights versus wisdom, wherever you're able to do that, simple words, don't have to be heavy. There you're showing me how smart you are, how actually intelligent you are as a reader, as an aspirant. And these are the level of questions that we're going to be asked here. These are the questions interview boards will ask you if they really want to understand you better. It's a good point.
Nationalism is universal, but patriotism has individual.
दिखाओ. हाँ, give example also. ठीक है. Lastly, one of the important things is that even when you grasp the truth, even when we start going towards the truth, right? We start going towards what is right, what is wrong. Sometimes what happens is we find a theory, we find an idea midway, and we come back with it. हो गया हमारी सत्य की खोज खत्म हो गई. We found the truth. We'll come back to the world and start another religion, or start another cult, or start another ism. And the world keeps going on. It doesn't owe anything to you, right? The reality keeps going on. It's so many variables. So what happens that if you've left midway, an example of communism, and you realize that the world is actually more complex than you thought it to be, it will automatically reduce you to nothing. That is why USSR got disintegrated. So जब भी history पढ़ो, कुछ पढ़ो, तो find the reasons why were people so bullish about it, and how did it just fail spectacularly, or has it failed, etc., etc. तब आप सही में antithesis लिख पाओगे. Okay?
तो इसमें compassion और sympathy को भी ला सकते हैं.
कैसे?
तो जैसे जो compassion का truth है वो हमें change दिखाया, लेकिन जो sympathy का truth है वो हमें change नहीं दिखाता, क्योंकि compassion होने के लिए sympathy होना जरूरी है, लेकिन ज्यादातर लोग हमारी सोसाइटी में सिर्फ sympathy तक ही रहता है.
Okay.
Compassion जब आता है तभी हम steps लेते हैं.
So what is the point that you're trying to make? जबरदस्ती दो द्वंद्व नहीं दिखाने या दो opposites नहीं दिखाने. This is a larger point with an example that you can prove. कि in this scenario, this was just compassion, empty compassion या empty sympathy, जो भी आप ऐसे बोलोगे. Just sympathy versus empathy is, if you want to go there, then you talk about that. In this example, it's better that we first, so like I said, right, you have to prioritize your dimensions also. You have to prioritize the hard hitting things first. That is what the level 5 was, evaluate. Internally, you need to evaluate, what do I write first? Okay. And then comes the most important part of your essay, which is towards the end, which is synthesis. So now we've done thesis at a good level, antithesis at a good level. Now we are mature. Now we can synthesize things and not give moral gyan. It's very important to know this. Halke mein mat lo. Most of us, by the time we reach towards the end of our essay, we slide towards, we should live in the harmony, we should live in this, all the shoulds and should not start coming in. Our analytics goes for a toss. Analytical thinking has gone for a toss. Okay? But if you just carry on, abhi tak jo bhi kiya tha, so what we did here was, we've clearly defined abhi tak what is the idea of truth, what is the ideal, and what's actually the practice. Okay? And this we'll find in most of the value heavy essay statements. Okay? What's the ideal, a good one, but actually mein kya hota hai, right? So what we do, we'll try to make this statement aspirational. Okay, fine, you should all do that. But in reality, do not forget where we live, how it's actually in practice, except maybe in science where this is practiced to the T. In most of the cases, we've seen examples where it's not. So we rephrase that. Okay, we rephrase that in our synthesis. Also, we realize that truth is not a fixed destination. It's ever evolving. We just realized with that communism example also. It's never going to be a fixed destination. If any of you over here or you guys have read Upanishads या Eastern philosophies, तो उसमें होता है ना, one who says he knows Brahman doesn't know Brahman. One who right? अगर आप बोल सकते हो ये ब्राह्मण है, वो नहीं, क्योंकि the language, the moment the language comes in here to mediate, it loses the essence. रामकृष्ण परमहंस ने एक जगह कहा था कि Vedas are tongue defiled wisdom. It's a sacrilege if you listen to it without the context. What he was saying is that you don't have to speak about it. You can't. The moment words come out, it will be clouded by your own understanding. Abhi tak hai. And therefore, it's wonder and wonder. The spiritual ascension is just wondrous. You can't speak. You just be in awe of it. Now, that is the truth of it. That language cannot mediate it. So therefore, you can never, it's not a fixed destination which you can say, I've arrived. You always have to be active, agile about it, right? And if this is true, then you will write about the best practices across the dimension which are there to ensure that we don't stop. And these are the best practices. This you will know from your GS understanding. So in synthesis, what we're doing, we're answering the question, okay, so what? Thesis is this, antithesis is this. Now, so what do we do now? Okay. And that's it. Ye wala is the quote of Rigveda. Ekam sat bahuda vipra vadanti karke kuch hai. It's just one truth and people realize it in different ways. Right? It's one of, there would be a diagram, if you remember from your science classes, I don't know, white light, and there's a prism, and it gets separated into different constituents of light. Very simple, right? Pink Floyd ka bhi yahi hai. insignia, right? What's happening is that this is truth and this is its various colors, various hues. This is your society. So you don't have to attack things here. You have to basically keep fine tuning this mirror, the glass. Okay? This was the toughest essay topic this year. It was toughest not because it's very difficult to figure out, but it has nuances which you have to analyze better. Okay? Cool, good. Now, if you remember, I was telling you, I'm not taking these PYQs by the serial number. I'm trying to find those PYQs which have a connection from one to another. Okay, how is this connected to the one we just solved? Abhi, what we saw, truth has no color, and we were talking about, okay, if it has no color, does it get colored by circumstances? If it gets colored, is it possible to uncolor it? If it's possible, how does that look like? Is it easy, difficult, whatever? And while all of this are happening, all the examples which come from the world history and whatever, right? Now this is the next question. Thought finds a world and creates one also. Hmm. 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 So that truth, that was like the most idealistic statement. Truth knows no color. Now these are the next statements. Okay, fine, but I have thoughts and I try to realize what is out there, right? तो सत्य की खोज में मैं कहाँ जाता हूँ? या तो पहले बाहर जाता हूँ फिर अंदर जाता हूँ. Something like that, right? So I try to find what is out there. What does happen then? Either it's reality out there, right? So how do I find things? Through my mind. This is the only faculty I have. How do I reason? It's through my mind. How do I negate something? Is through my mind. How far my mind can actually negotiate with reality. Okay? How fine tune is my instrument of mind, which I keep finding out, right? ये पीछे का सब, right? So this is what's happening here. The first essay basically asks, like I said, about can truth be found? Can it transcend the filters, society, वगैरह वगैरह. Now it's like, okay, does reality transcends human framing? मतलब my biases, or am I co-creating? Is there an objective reality out there which I am discovering? Yeah, I am just co-creating things. समझ में आया इसका? अभी ऐसे नहीं लिखना है, but just समझ में आया? Am I looking at you and looking at you for who you are, or my biases? That this is how you're sitting, this is how you're standing, this is how your eyes are gleaming now, right? How is it happening, right? Now we'll do just a ranker level thesis. Okay, beginner level, so we can all figure out whenever we are alone. So in any topic, when you get, most often than not, your thesis is going to be the first part. Thought finds the world. You're going to agree with it. Yeah, this is what actually happens. Or to begin with, that's how life happens. Okay. There's a reality outside us, and that is waiting to be uncovered. That is what we think. That is how scientific, if you've studied science, that's how we usually think. You're okay, dude. Hey, पानी वानी पीना अगर भाग के आ रहे हो, ठीक है? Feel free. This is how science works. We start observing things outside. We have our instruments which have their own least count, basically, and we start measuring reality. Okay? So thought has two parts then. One is thought can keep creating something. I can create art, I can create whatever, whimsically, कुछ भी ना करता हूँ. Or thought can basically receive what is out there. ठीक है? ये जो बारीकी और nuance है ना, ये पकड़ना है. ठीक है? When I say that thought finds a world, I'm basically talking about that my mind and the thoughts are basically able to observe and reflect. Yeah, but in the thesis, I'm just going to talk about I can observe the laws of nature. I can observe and I can reflect. I can observe what's happening around me and I can reflect on that. ठीक है? Basics है. ठीक है? Laws of gravity, they still hold. मतलब even before they were recognized, they were still doing their job. There is an external reality which is already there. DNA helix was already there. ठीक है? Plate tectonics already in motion. We figured out it late, but that doesn't matter. The reality is already out there and we figure it out, and then accordingly we tell the world. That's how it happens. Okay? not just in science, even across cultures. Remember in the last Truth Knows No Color में, we're talking about justice across compassion in Buddhism, justice in this, then Kant's categorical imperative. Similar चीजें दिख रही हैं यहाँ पे. Across cultures, some truths, some reality are already there, and we keep finding them. That means it must be objective. I'm finding the same things, I'm finding the same values. Correct? These are your arguments for the thesis. Okay? What does it basically tells us that knowledge is objective and it's less random. Right? There is some objective reality out there and I can figure it out. And then you will give examples across science, across cultures, across thinkers, even in your basic concepts like economics. The logic of demand and supply already exists. Someone figured out, gave a name to it, and then someone will build on top of it. Okay? This is this part, that thought finds a world. Okay? We come to this. And again, our logic is simple. I'm going to ask all the buts which can come on that statement. ठीक है? All the buts. अगर बचपन में या कभी why वाला बहुत किया होगा ना, you'll be able to do this better. And the more and better you get with your पढ़ाई लिखाई in UPSC, right? The more knowledge you will have. You will be able to ask better questions. There's a quote, right? The mark of a good student is not in what answers they give, but what kind of questions they ask. ये सब चीजें ऐसे पेपर में आएंगी. Not just in how you're writing, but also how you're engaging with the essay. ठीक है? Every cliche, every proverb, every gyan which you have heard since your childhood, it'll come right back in the essay papers now because they're getting more reflective.
Antithesis is like counter argument.
It's not just counter argument. Antithesis would be like, I'm just giving an analogy ki this is the main thing, and then I can see some chinks in the armor or some edge cases where it doesn't satisfy. What you're saying makes sense, but there are so many instances where it doesn't hold true. ठीक है? जैसे क्या?
जैसे आपने कहा कि सर ट्रूथ वाकई में एग्जिस्ट करता है क्या? फिर सर जैसे ये तो क्वेश्चन के टाइप में हो गया, तो सर इसका अगर मेरे को सर काउंटर आर्गुमेंट करना पड़ेगा, तो सर मैं इसका आंसर भी दूंगा.
Counter argument synthesis will give some possible solution. So thesis for the truth question is like truth is colorless and all that thing is true. Antithesis is that yes, but I see that it is mediated by all these language constructs, power and this and that, and it's not that easy to find also. And you give examples to prove your point. You can't just say something and not prove it. And then the next question logically comes is, okay, so what? ठीक है, fine, you're right. अब क्या करें फिर? What do we do now? That comes in synthesis. हाँ, synthesis is not just way forward. तो भूल जाओ वो सब. Synthesis is basically, synthesis is not like concession, दे दो कुछ तो क्या करें फिर, दोनों चीजें सही हैं क्या? और नहीं, thesis is the right thing, or the antithesis is the right. It's not that. Synthesis is basically, okay, these two have elements of truth in them. How do I walk further in life? Okay, that is what synthesis is. एक दिन में नहीं आएगा. You'll have to keep getting better at it. So every week we're having classes under Smash, and it's right now it's open to UAP students also. If you're not attending this, I can guarantee that you'll lose marks. It doesn't matter what you're practicing on your own. It doesn't matter. This bit is technical. It needs practice. Okay. Okay. Now you see, thought finds a world and creates one also. Is that all that is out there? No. We talked about, right? I'm just going to the nuance. Antithesis basically probes deeper. So जो बोल रहा है ना, I'll go into the depth of your assumptions. How am I understanding reality through the instruments that I'm creating? और क्या समझ रहा हूँ? ऐसे ही समझ रहा हूँ? Or dimensions or KPIs that I create. If I have to understand economics of a country and I've already created GDP as a measure, then that's it. Every country I'll measure from GDP, and you would have read in your economics or you would read in newspaper how limiting that is, right? So whatever reality I do get is basically the result of the dimensions I already have. I'll talk about a thinker जिसने ये सब बातें भी कही हैं, but these are commonsensical things, है ना? साइंस के स्टूडेंट हो कोई भी अंडरग्रेड में या फिर लीस्ट काउंट एरर्स पता है ना? लीस्ट काउंट एरर क्या होता था? योर इंस्ट्रूमेंट हैज अ लीस्ट काउंट एरर, meaning if the reality is in that least count error zone, you will not be able to figure it out, right? If the scale with which you are measuring this table as just inches in the dimension, so you will not be able to figure out this and 5 whatever 2 inches or whatever this is plus few centimeter, both will be 2 inches for you only, because there is no. So by the very funda of the paradigm and the framework that you're using, you've conditioned reality. That's okay, but sometimes what happens, we make up a concept like race. When Nazis, they went for the Jew Holocaust with their full zeal and mission, what did they do? They just did not say that Jews are bad. They then also created the whole propaganda and movies and theories and whatnot. So we create our concepts and then we alter the reality. That's on the bad side, right? And these are neutral examples, time zones. We've created for our convenience and then rest of the world. So the moment we forget ना कि ये जो मैं बातें कर रहा हूँ इसके assumptions क्या हैं, and we think that यही reality है, that's where I go wrong. There's another PYQ question, I think if you remember, map is not the territory, or there's a statement, map is not the territory. Map is just a convenient representation of reality. That is not exactly what reality is, right? You can make better maps. Maybe in the map you can have terrains and all those things. It's still not the representation of reality. ठीक है?
इसमें एग्जांपल दे सकते हैं इसमें कि thought of abolishing untouchability find in world of colonized India, but created in independent India.
What is the point that you are trying to say then?
सर जो untouchability को abolish करने का जो thought था, वो जब हम colonized थे जब आया था, लेकिन जब हम independent हो गए, तब हमने उसको truth बना दिया.
So you're basically saying that the thought comes, but for it to actually come in, for it to actually create a reality, a lot of other things have to be in the place. Political will, social will, whatever, right? Thought doesn't create reality on its own just because a thought happens. Okay? There are so many other variables which have to come in place. Okay? This, I think we've understood well. Human perception is not always mirroring reality, right? We confirmation biases. These are, by the way, psychological issues with humans. Okay? So in our course, we study about all the modern psychological tests and experiments which have happened, because of which we are not able to do something. If we are not mature about these things, then we'll really not understand our own gaps and our own limitations as human beings. Okay, these things add nuance. आप कुछ कर नहीं पा रहे हो, क्यों नहीं कर पा रहे हो? When people say that, you know what, switch off the social media and just go and study, such a simple statement, but you're not able to do that because there are the best minds of the world from MIT, IIT, and Harvard who are out there to write a code, and they know your psychology well, that will the next notification they will send, you will not be able to resist it. So these Gyan statement which I will give you, that just DND पे लगा ले अपना phone, are nothing but cruel optimism from my side. They're optimistic statements, अरे कुछ नहीं होता, but it's a very cruel optimism. It basically shifts the blame to you. Now you are the reason why you're not able to study, not the system, not the algorithms. Okay? The more you'll understand reality, things around you in this level, the better you'll become as a human also. फालतू ताने नहीं मारोगे अपने को और दूसरों को. ठीक है? This is the reason why essay papers are much more mature than what others are realizing अभी तक. Essay papers are not about dropping examples, not about dropping something from your optional or from GS. कुछ नंबर नहीं आएंगे, बहुत ही average marks आएंगे. Essay papers are not about heavy vocabulary stuff. There is a knowledge gap which you have to fill, and there is a critical thinking gap which you have to fill. ठीक है? You have to fill it starting अभी. ठीक है? The better you fill these things, the better your GS papers will also be. Ethics so definitely will be better if you go this way. Okay, cool. That what you were saying, untouchability, is this point. Thought doesn't just find a world automatically. Its revolution seems to be mediated by power structures. Just because you think something, it would not happen, even if you truly believe in. World will not come and agree with you. There are thinkers which are much far ahead of their time. So when they are living, they are ridiculed like crazy. And when they're long gone, then they're remembered. If you would, I hope everyone on YouTube is able to understand, do write in the comment. Swami Vivekananda, when he was living, people did not understand him. You know that to be true, right? His letters, if you get an access to them, he's crying in those letters. He's emotionally outraging that तुम लोग को क्या समझ में नहीं आ रहा है and whatnot. After his death, he is the icon of Hinduism in spiritual India, right? हर चौराहे में स्वामी विवेकानंद की मूर्ति होगी. And while he was living, he was writing everyone, why are you not ascending to the real teachings of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa? Why are you still doing these things? This is how reality is, okay? Now we move to synthesis. Synthesis, like I said, is basically at that level of maturity. That, okay, reality can exist outside us, but we only have access to reality through us or the instruments that we've created. Or to kaise aa rahi reality? That's how it is, right? External or internal, right? And this basically creates a dual movement. So there's always a duality. You always have to be very conscious about what you are getting and how you're measuring it. That is why in science, there's a theory from Karl Popper, falsification theory. सुना है किसी ने नाम? नाम तो सुना होगा. हाँ, Karl Popper ने सबको, that's something, it was a very defining theory in science. It's a very modern theory. हमारे ज़मानों की है, मतलब not like when we were born, but it's a very modern theory, falsification. And it falsifies, if what you are saying cannot be falsified under any condition, then that's a bunk theory. तो वो जितने all these एस्ट्रोलॉजी और ये सब के क्लेम्स हैं, सैटर्न खराब है आपका, ये वो आप देखोगे वो अगले दिन कुछ और हो रहा है तो भी उससे कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ रहा है. दैट्स नॉट अ थ्योरी देन टू बिलीव इन. सो फॉल्सिफिकेशन थ्योरी इज लाइक वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट एंड वील स्टडी दीज थिंकर्स, हाना आर्डन, कार्ल पोपर, थॉमस कुन. वील स्टडी दीज मॉडर्न थिंकर्स because what they have done is they've gone and rethink the ideas जो old classical thinkers were used to think, and they've presented in a way like we can understand. Anyway, okay, so we see that climate change, example, was discovered with the hard facts of nature, correct? But the moment it was discovered, how do we talk about that? We talk about that now in categories: carbon footprint, net zero, right? It's kind of a co-creation. We can't help it. That's how it is going to be. Synthesis out here is going to tell you this is true. It has its own limitation, but we can't help it. This is how it's going to be. And so you have to have safeguards. You have to have the right focus on things. You have to keep fine tuning. Karl Popper and Thomas Kuhn, these are all scientific philosophers, right? They said that, you will find errors in your theory. The truth, the honest assessment would then be to reject the old one. Jiska error dikh gaya hai, not keep holding on to it. Okay. And so responsibility lies on us. And then you have all these institutional safeguards जो हमने पहले भी पढ़े थे. ठीक है, साइंस में क्या है, पॉलिटिक्स में क्या है, जस्टिस में क्या है. ठीक है, while all this is happening, while this thing in duality is happening, thought is finding a world and we're also creating it, then whatever parameters we've created, from that we are measuring the world. It's like a back and forth happening on. While this is happening, there have to be responsibility somewhere. This is a very analytical synthesis. इसमें कोई moral science की बातें नहीं है और कोई moral ज्ञान नहीं है, कोई अच्छा बुरा नहीं है, नो बाइनरीज गुड एंड बैड, नथिंग लाइक दैट. ठीक है, दिस इज वेयर यू हैव टू रीच स्लोली एंड स्लोली. ठीक है, दिस कैन ओनली हैपन इफ यू आर स्टडीइंग विद अलर्ट हेड स्पेस. Okay, now you remember that Bloom taxonomy which I made, this one. At lower levels we are just understanding and remembering and understanding. At mid level we apply our knowledge, which is what you guys would do in Samachar Manthan if you're writing the tests, or you guys would do in whatever, the weekly stuff that we do. But while you're studying by yourself also, and when you talk with your mentors, try to ask the why questions. When you're coming to my class in the essay paper, try to ask the why, because this is where you analyze and evaluate. Analyze is basically बाल की खाल निकालना. I want to understand the assumptions of your theory or whatever you're saying. क्या है assumption उसके? ठीक है. Evaluate is like, okay, so what? How do I prioritize? Is everything so important? That's what we do anyway daily in life. आज क्या पढ़ना है? कल क्यों पढ़ना है? Cool. ठीक है अभी. Is it heavy? Is it okay? Everyone on chat. Is it heavy? सही है? Making sense, right? Simple, fluid. ये बताओ. This is a topic. Among the four, most people attempted this topic. Muddy water is best cleared by leaving it alone. How is this related to the thought essay? Thought finds the world.
So like time heals.
नहीं, वो इसका अपना है.
सर जब डिप्रेशन में होते हैं या फिर सर जब टेंशन में होते हैं तो सारा थॉट्स अपने दिमाग में आने लग जाते हैं, तो सर उस टाइम डिसीजन लेने से बढ़िया है कि
Ah. Yeah. So basically it's about mind's role in clarity. वो भी thought finds a world and creates one too. How my mind, how clarity, how can I gain more clarity to create a world which is right, more evolving, has all the right values in the right place. ठीक है, उसका जो antithesis था, remember this, thought finds a world and creates one also, का antithesis. But is the discovery of reality really neutral, or do we invent categories first and then discover reality with that lens? Same thing, muddy water. Should I be meddling with it, or should I let it be? Okay. These things will get clearer as you go with these. You'll get the deck, but these things will be much more clearer as you go along with this, right? So in the thought essay, antithesis already points out that thought doesn't just find, it frames, distorts, right? In the muddy water, I'm taking one step further. Excessive framing. If you apply a lot of rules and regulation on some situation which right now is chaotic, okay, might be bad. So maybe restraint is good. Maybe do not apply a thought right now to figure out what world this is. If it's not coming to you, maybe be patient. Okay, if that conflict is not resolving, let it be. Okay. Another thing, which is it's kind of an X factor point. In the thought essay, we realize that institution shapes category, right? Correct? Institutions have their own GDP or whatever their ways of measuring things, and that is how they're shaping the reality which we see. Okay. In this, we'll see that sometimes institutions over legislate. In your GS or in your daily news stuff, you would see, right? Sometimes it's over governance. Sometimes government is criticized for having policies which are like more taxing not in the taxing, but overburdening the system. In those times, we should remember sometimes we should just let things be. The ground institutions and the panchayati and the ground level people will figure out on their own, and leaders are best when they hear from the ground कि क्या करना चाहिए. So let the muddy water be. It will find its common ground zero. Okay. Same way, thesis. Same fundamental. Whenever you have to do a ranker level thesis, you have to organize it into categories. ठीक है, जो भी तुम फंडे सोचो, put it into categories. ठीक है, start adding the why as well, right? So nature and science analogies are very simple over here, right? Muddy water is best cleared, nature में कैसा होता है. It's a very simple thing. But psychological angle is what you mentioned, right? Depression होता है या कभी समझ में नहीं आता, तो best of the religions and best of the things, they recommend you to do just that. So psychologically, this line completely fits. Not just that, socio-political realm mein, we've seen how Gandhi's ahimsa, what did he do? There was a muddy water where Britishers were aggressors, but Gandhi ne kaha, I don't have to fight back in the same plane. I don't have to act, eye for the eye thing. He said that let me just use restraint, an active restraint. Okay? Take this fight to a next level where I have the moral upper hand. Now this takes time. Goli chalana is like what? A second's job. But to practice ahimsa, to practice the tenets of Gandhi, it takes time. Okay? But you are clearly able to show the injustice of the oppressor. Okay? And you're able to take it to the higher moral ground. That's how it is. So in socio-political conditions also you do this. Cuban Missile Crisis, I don't know if you guys know about it or not. Same thing. It was not passive कि कोई कुछ नहीं कर रहा है. They had blockades, they had negotiations, they had everything. They just did not escalate it to war because the nuclear war was imminent. So it's good. Times like these, it's good that you follow restraint. ये तो thesis हो गई. You tell me what the antithesis of this would be. Then I'll go to the next slide. What are the assumptions that this policy will best resolve a conflict? नहीं, question है, what are the assumptions that this is true? That muddy water will be best resolved if I do nothing. What are the assumptions there? What would be my antithesis to this?
सर जैसे करप्शन बढ़ता जा रहा है, इधर अगर हम उसके खिलाफ कोई एक्शन नहीं लेंगे तो सर वो आगे प्रॉब्लम नहीं करेगा.
बढ़िया. Good point. So there are some themes, some places where you cannot just let the muddy water be. Okay, some conditions in some themes. Or एक तो ये हो गया कि कुछ so this is done. ठीक है, that some things if you don't do anything it will fester as a wound, it will deepen, it will become worse. और क्या होता है, assumption क्या है इसका? और तुम बताओ भाई.
जैसे सोसाइटी मतलब कोई चीज है उसका जो बीच अपने आप के बीच में आके तो कोई भी सोसाइटी है जो चीज है वो रिस्टोरेटिव चीज है, वो अपने नॉर्मल को अपने आप रिस्टोर करने की, तो उसमें तो जरूरी नहीं है, पर जो बाहर से आर्टिफिशियल अलग से क्रिएटेड है उसके लिए मैं इसको सॉल्व करना है.
ठीक है, so refine these thoughts. I have to first ensure that there is no extra mud coming in the water. If I just take this analogy, that there is a beaker and there is mud in the beaker and someone is telling me let it be. I have to ensure that there is no extra mud coming in. Pehla, this is cordoned off. दूसरा, I have to be sure कि this is a self-correcting formula. What if it doesn't self-correct? तो ये ऐसे ही रहेगा, 10 दिन बाद आओ तो भी वैसे ही रहेगा वो. ठीक है. Worst thing is what you said कि वो self-correcting भी नहीं है, वो actually छोड़ दोगे तो it will go monstrous. Societal inequalities. ठीक है ना? Vicious cycles. तो ये पता है ना पॉइंट्स, ये सोच पा रहे हो ना, इनको ना वहाँ पे लिखना होता है ढंग से. ये नहीं हो पाता if you're not in the practice of these things. ये जो obvious, this is not rocket science by the way, but these obvious things will not come handy at the paper. अब पढ़ो. ये तो जो तुमने पॉइंट कहते वो हैं यहाँ पे. Do all problems self-correct? Epidemics don't vanish by waiting. Corruption doesn't fade by inaction. Okay? Does time heal all wounds, or some problems deepen with neglect? Climate change. All these things which you're studying in your GS papers are actually going to come here handy. All these things. You just have to put in the right dimension and give the argument. Examples you already know. So all of you guys, as you go deeper with the UPSC studies, you'll know examples a lot. Third point. This, very important. Sometimes non-action is actually worse. Because morally then you are culprit in whatever evil that's happening. कैसे? पहलगाम अटैक कैसे?
सर उसको ऐसे छोड़ के तो भाई वैक्सीन से मतलब सब यही कहते हैं कि गवर्नमेंट ने कुछ किया नहीं.
नहीं, इस लेवल पे होना चाहिए. Holocaust. You are not standing against your government if it's doing something wrong. You're saying हो जाएगा कुछ अपने आप. It's not impacting you, but it's impacting a segment of people which you will be answerable later at the world stage. This is where your non-action basically inaction. There's a very, I think it's a PYQ that the worst places in hell are reserved for people who in times of moral crisis do not act. The worst place in hell are reserved for those who in times of moral crisis they stay neutral. Understand the gravity of these quotes if you really have to score marks in UPSC.
अमेंडमेंट आ तो उसमें प्राइवेसी को लेकर कुछ डाटा देने से मना, तो इसके खिलाफ बहुत लिमिटेड प्रोटेस्ट हुआ था, तो किस पॉइंट पे ला सकते हैं?
Yeah, and वो point कैसे आएगा? Because there is a huge knowledge gap. People are not even aware of the multiple levels at which this privacy issue can actually impact them in future. ठीक है? They think it's very trivial right now.
So Winston Churchill let millions of people die during when the installation.
So वो क्या है? इसमें muddy water ये कैसे आया?
Muddy water ने तो सब में से morality की बात की ना.
कुछ और है example है. I get the example, but ये सब नहीं करना है. So this is one thing which all of you have to be very, very aware of. You'll listen to some keywords and an example will come in your mind. Don't just go with that. Understand if that example makes sense in this perspective or not. Yeah. Otherwise, something will come in your head, you'll start writing. And then it's too late. And then your thoughts will color your essay already. ये सब ऐसे के सारे questions ना बिल्कुल they'll come in live in how you're preparing.
इसमें इंटरनेशनल रिलेशंस को ला सकते हैं, जैसे इंडिया विद मालदीव को आता है।
Examples बहुत मिल जाएंगे, ठीक है, and therefore this session and this class is not about examples. Like I said, this is about thinking abilities, how you think through it. Exactly. That is level 3 application, ठीक है, and you can apply a lot. In most GS papers के directives ask you just to apply, keep applying.
Based on that example, then
Actually, you know what, how you should study, how one should study from the level 5 onwards. Most of us think that okay, first we will complete all the base, then we will understand it better, फिर apply करेंगे examples, when we have enough examples, when we remember, we'll apply, then we'll graduate to analyze, then we will evaluate. ये करते करते उम्र बीत जाती है. This is why we don't run a foundation course at CD. This is why everything is more mentoring or more do it yourself. The idea is that you have to engage on the analysis and evaluation thing. Once you do that, and it's tough, it's very tough. In fact, if you start doing it from today, you'll find that you'll progressing much more slowly through your syllabus. You're actually walking with a snail's pace. Because it's so easy to remember, not to talk about everything, that just easy to collect notes, very easy to keep making one-pager notes or just keep collecting stuff. It fills you up with a lot of psychological comfort, right? If you're able to basically explain simple things, right? Whatever answer you're writing goes unchecked. It gives a lot of comfort. That's psychological comfort which will take your life later. The more you're going on the analysis side, that is why it's tough. That is why group sessions are important. Offline meetings are important, or Zoom sessions are important, because that's when you say, oh, I couldn't even think of this that way. But these 10 people are able to think like that. So they're thinking ahead of curve. Okay. Synthesis. In this, if you've understood the thesis and antithesis, the synthesis is basically that there is a difference between active restraints and passive indifference. There's a difference if you let something be and you're looking at it, you're evaluating it in every moment or the right timeline, versus छोड़ के निकल गए तुम. ठीक है, इसमें difference है. ये है synthesis का nuance. So we need to understand the context and what sequence to play. Understand the context of the problem which we're trying to solve. So you said, right, some things are self-correcting. Natural calamities like we saw in COVID, right, they self-correct themselves, right? So say the learning we get is that do not disturb the ecosystem much, don't make it go to a point of no self-correction, otherwise you don't have to do anything also. Ganga got cleaned, right, in that time. The data shows that. A lot of other things. Some things are self-corrective, some things are not. जैसे वो corruption था. So now I am understanding the contextual difference between where that statement applies, where it doesn't apply. समझ रहे हो? Maturity. That is the maturity you have to show in the essay paper. That this statement which was given as a thesis statement makes sense, but only in these limited contexts. Even in those limited contexts, these are the boundary conditions that must be followed. Okay? So yes, life can be lived with this principle, but provided these things are there. That's it. Rest you can read. 3 topics ho gaye, and they're connected. We'll do the last topic and then we'll close the day today. And these are heavy topics, and I can see. The years teach much which days never know. Tell me how it's connected to the previous one.
So all the essays which come like that are the interconnected things.
Isn't it looking like that?
So this is a commonality in the UPSC.
They are connected across PYQs, but I'm able to find connections within the paper also. I have not set up the paper. I'm just sharing you a connection which, if you don't feel that's a connection, then you can dispute it also. But these connections are there so that while you're preparing for the next year, the best aspirants are actually able to reuse the statements of these essay topics in the next year questions. That's part 1. Part 2, for the essay, the micro themes are nothing but they'll come out from this. ठीक है, essay का syllabus क्या है? कुछ नहीं है. You just have to write concisely. What are the 3 things which UPSC essay paper says? बताओ. वो syllabus के उसमें क्या आता है?
क्लियर होना चाहिए, कंसाइज होना चाहिए और टॉपिक के अराउंड होने चाहिए.
Correct. This is basically what do you get out of it? Nothing. It's a feel good statement. It's like वो अच्छी बातें. या ऐसे लिखो नंबर आएंगे लाइक मैं तो बहुत रायता फैला के रखा हूँ बट right, it's that it doesn't help. What helps then is to go through the PYQs, understand what recurring micro themes they're asking. So people who have optional syllabus, PSIR, sociology, anthro also maybe, and philosophy, you will be able to do slightly better if you're studying your options well. People with technical options will have some difficulty because thinkers and all are not there, and GS papers will not have those things. This is actually a tough paper essay. Most people don't give any time to this, so they don't even score well unless you're very good in school level. Okay. Last one, the years teach much which days never know. The commonality between this and the previous one is time, the role of time in bringing clarity. That muddy water, if you leave it alone, will give clarity, etc. is time, right? Time is the underlying variable, right? And this years teach much which days never know. Basically, matlab kya hota hai? Wisdom is more than action right now, right here, right? You learn more when you spend more time. Experience teaches you a lot. It's these kind of things, right? So basic interpretation, all of you will be able to do.
How many of them were philosophical essays?
All of them were philosophical essays. And that should not be a question you're asking now. No, it's not, sorry. That basically means you're not attending any sessions, vagera, vagera. It will cost you dearly. I'm being very frank. This is how things are shifting. UPSC is not same every year. There are things which shift. You need to align your studies accordingly. Okay? Rocket science shift नहीं होगा, लेकिन simple shift sign, you need to know them. Thesis, ranker level. Just spend a few moments with this. And people in the comment, I'm reading yours now. Thesis, a good thesis, basically a good thesis paragraph is always going to be something which is organized better. Okay? And then prioritized. वो priority क्या होगी? You will keep getting better as you read a lot more and more. And these are simple statements, just that you have to have a calm head to bucket these things together. So basically this thing is talking about time. That with time things start getting clearer, which they cannot get clear in the day. It's a very close companion of the muddy water. Okay? Except that muddy water talks only about conflicts. This talks about everything. Okay? Time is the teacher, and that is how revealed truths which are hidden to a common eye, they gets revealed. In every discipline, you have to stay put with something. Archaeology, geography, everything, right? Even epistemological studies, when you read texts, पुराने text पढ़ते हो, उनको compare करते हो, you find the common truths. It takes time. If you just read one line from any, and this is what is going wrong in India also, right? एक line पढ़ ली कहीं से, and that's the truth. वो जो हनुमान चालीसा का है, युग सहस्त्र योजन पर भानु, वो उसने speed of light बता दी. Really, is that the purport of Hanuman Chalisa? Is that what it's written for? But that is what happens when you just read one line and you have to prove a point. It's the same thing. Truth knows no color, but if you are hell-bent on having prejudice and bias in your mind and you'll interpret a text with that note and go out in the media channel and talk about that, you'll create some division. These are like mini plateaus which you'll run with. Okay? These are the things that a good aspirant and a good human should be able to figure out and then write. Okay? Time converts raw experience to wisdom. We've been speaking, right? Your head is spinning, depression ho raha hai, lot of bad stuff is happening. Immediately you will not get an answer. Let it settle down. Spiritual traditions are built on these things. Okay? So they'll prove the point. Yes, it's right. The years teach much, which days can never know. You can't solve it, but stay put with it. Time is the ultimate test. Some theories or whatever isms and whatever way of life have come in the society, if they don't stand the test of time, then basically they were not worth it. So there are so many fads which come, right? So many startups which opened over the last 10 years and they closed down. AI revolution came, so many startups opened in AI and then they closed down. They could not stand a test of time, right? So the years teach much which days never know. People who don't believe in this statement might believe कि वो startup बहुत सही कर रही हैं या बहुत सही है, FOMO हो जाता है. You have this FOMO culture, right? What am I doing preparing for UPSC? I should rather go and do some startup, right? But give it some time, give it a few months, and you see, buy juice or anything, you see them crumbling down. ठीक है? Antithesis. अच्छा बताओ antithesis क्या होगा इसका? And people on the, what would be the antithesis to this? Where does this statement not hold true? What am I assuming here?
Time is the biggest healer.
Versus what else can be a healer?
In the end, सारे जो हमारे सिंगल डे के अफेयर होंगे वही जाके साल को अच्छा बनेंगे.
चलो ये तो मॉरल साइंस की बात होगी कि हर दिन ढंग से जियो. It's not disputing this. वो मना नहीं कर रहा है. This statement is saying that do not believe that hustle or action today is going to give you the effort. Wisdom only comes through time. That's the statement. Never. There's this superlative word, right? Days can never know something.
Also, we cannot wait for the correct time to come. We have to perform.
But there would be some situations where you can't wait for time, right?
जैसे disaster management.
Yes.
हाँ but it's वो नहीं लगता यहाँ पे. Disaster वो तो people epiphanies happen in moments and yeah. अब ये समझो, पढ़ो. Sometime what happens is that you have epiphanies. एक idea कौन सा है? You have a flash of brilliance in your mind, right? You don't need to wait for time or ages. Sometime it just happens in a flash. ठीक है? The Newton का apple movement, Buddha's का enlightenment, Gandhi. Sometimes there's only one incident which transforms something, and history is replete. Rosa Parks, ठीक है? You decided not to give the bus seat. That changed things. It sparks something up. ठीक है? You don't have to think it through. Everyone doesn't have to think it through. I don't know. Maybe I should ask the elders. They know better. Because age is not the guarantee always of wisdom. It's a fallacy. And we know that. Just because you're senior to me doesn't mean you know better. Time is not the guarantee for wisdom. Right? Just so we've seen all around. And in technically you say years are necessary but not sufficient condition. Jैसे there was a question, doubter is the true man of science. Doubt is necessary, yes, but it's not a sufficient condition. There are so many other things have to be. ठीक है, होता है ना? This thing looks right, but it's a necessary condition, but not the sufficient condition. तीन और चीजें होनी चाहिए for that to happen. You have to think like this. Learning requires reflective engagement. It's the same thing as essays. You might think of time as I have read 50 essays. Yeah, okay. Have you reflected on even one of them? If you've not, then the time that you took for those 50 essays and the one pager notes, whatever you've got, is nothing. It's of no use because the next essay will come and you'll not be able to reproduce. या करोगे भी तो वो stock images होती है ना, example डाल दो. You know what stock images are, right? You Google anything, you'll get so many images about something. So there are websites and startups which are built on stock images. Give me $10 and I'll give you all the images of a child playing with lollipop. And then you can insert that everywhere. Those are your examples. It won't help you. It doesn't help. Time does not always purify. And sometimes it may entrench errors. If same thing as previous one, right? Years teach much only when you are reflecting on that. If you're not reflecting on that, sometimes they entrench evils in the society. तो उससे तो बेटर है कि अभी कोई moral courage लेके आके solve कर दे, चाहे मर जाए या whatever, चाहे there's a cost to be paid, but it's better that you raise a voice even if you've not thought through the whole strategy. And someone who's saying doesn't matter, just hold on, doesn't matter really, it will come true, I'll talk to them. The extremist versus moderate argument would be like this. Okay? And lastly, we also see that what happens sometimes even through ages, people still don't get the essence, and they're rather than converging to a truth, they start arguing more. So the same events in history will now be seen with two different perspectives, and there's no common ground now. So these are again idealistic statements. For them to be true, a lot of other things also have to happen. Okay, and that's how it is. This is the antithesis and this is the synthesis. That time, what it does is it creates condition. But if you're not reflective, if you're not paying heed to that, कुछ नहीं फायदा होने वाला. It will not create wisdom in itself. Okay, Abraham Lincoln का जो very famous example है, which is about he failed in business, he failed in electoral politics and whatnot. That didn't automatically make him the wise man that he was, right? He kept reflecting on that. So that's an important point. So in synthesis, what we've done, we've added the missing element. ठीक है, time is not unnecessary, is a necessary but not sufficient condition. That's what we've done. Okay, can you send Abhishek? Yeah. Do you remember the epiphany wala example, the antithesis? Sometime epiphany can happen, you have a eureka moment. Because intensity matters. Startups, even though they've failed in India or they've failed a lot, but why are they still valued? Because the people who are in a startup, they are the most intense people. Unlike large scale companies जहाँ पे चल रहा है काम चलते रहने दो. I have legacy on my side, keep working now. ठीक है? This is important. Years test endurance, but wisdom requires periodic reforms. Another thing, we believe that as years go by, your legitimacy keeps grounded. But अगर तुम reforms नहीं कर रहे, if you're not active, if you're not agile, then you'll create grave errors and commit grave errors. ठीक है? So the years teach much will not hold true unless there are inbuilt system in the institutionalization of that thing, right? समझ रहे हो? These are all commonsensical things.
Can we bring restraint involved?
कैसे?
It is happening over around 2 years.
हाँ, so
The
what
time is,
what will you say? So what should have been done then? Are you saying that UN or whatever should just have crushed the war in the first day or first month?
means that there isn't no side is getting anything. Just people are suffering. The education is not.
I didn't get your name.
Athar.
Athar, whatever idea you come now, you have a flash of an idea. Think through the whole point. So Russia and Ukraine war is basically looks like a stalemate situation when no one is winning, but the world is suffering. Not just lives are lost, climate changes and whatnot is happening, right? That is basically a proposition for the world at large. The world has not learned from the wars that it has seen that when should it intervene and when should it let it escalate. That this muddy water will not settle on its own. Something has to happen. Okay? And you need to use all those instruments of non-aggression to bring these two parties to a table. Correct? Put points like this. आधा पर्दा सोचोगे ना, हल्का सा लिखाओगे, explain भी नहीं कर पाओगे. But like I said, you guys have all the right points in your head. You have all those ideas. Yeah, this could be done, that could be done. You have to just think it out, flesh it out better. Okay? And then thinkers across generation, you remember this quote, right? Justice delayed is justice denied. Right? So क्या हो गया? आपकी wisdom took 10 years to catch up. So many happen, right? In so many cases which are like very bad in India and they take 10 years to come through. It's of no use then. It's a sad scenario. Right? With that, we finish this. Okay? 4 questions, very heavy. We've done that, the bulk of the work. कोई question हो तो बताओ. People on YouTube, if you have any questions, please send. I'll just wait for 2 more minutes before I close.
While reading the topper essay, what should be come up with? What should be the you should take an example.
Yeah, that's the only thing you can do while you're reading a ranker's essay. At this level, beginner's level, you can only take examples. As you mature slightly, you will be able to understand how they are closing the paragraphs, how they're applying this task. Most rankers, even if they don't know the task framework to the T, that's the way life emerges. This is the point, this is slightly on the counter side of it, and this is synthesis. Okay? So you will start realizing that.
तो मैंने आज ये फील किया कि ये एग्जांपल नहीं है जो मैटर कर रहे हैं, एक्सप्लेनेशन ज्यादा मैटर.
आर्गुमेंट.
तो इशू ये आता है कि जब मैं ऐसे लिखता हूँ तो एक डायमेंशन आ गया, इसका एग्जांपल आ गया, लेकिन बीच में जो एक्सप्लेनेशन है वो हर जगह नहीं आता. और एक और इशू है कि जैसे कोई एग्जांपल आ गया लेकिन वो थोड़ा सा रिलेट कर रहा है, पूरा नहीं है, तो वहां से निकल के दूसरी डायमेंशन पे कैसे जंप करें?
you're a UAP student,
नहीं, स्मैश नहीं।
स्मैश मेंस में हो, एक ऐसे लिखना फिर बात करते हैं, ठीक है? I can give ज्ञान on that essay भी, but it will not hit you, and I know that it won't make a difference. So there is, someone asked about knowledge gap. There is a thing about knowledge gap also in this. You can't write an essay just purely on intuition and common sense. Purely on that you will not be able to write. ठीक है? You need to know democracy के coordinates क्या होते हैं, but for everything you need to know the fundamentals of that. So not the examples, not a lot of examples that you can complete in last 1 month also. Yeah? We give out those X factor notes, right? Example, anecdote, quotes, and whatever that you will get. Brainstorming is something like, this is brainstorming. This me asking you and pushing you to a limit is brainstorming. और क्या होती है? यही होती है. This you answering half-heartedly or something which is not fully formed is part of the brainstorming. So it's good that you were actually giving answers. The people who were not, they didn't extract the maximum benefit out of this. Okay, so whoever's writing here, this is what the maximum benefit looks like.
Last 5 years पे जो ऐसे जाए उनपे तो brainstorming करेंगे.
5 साल बहुत होते हैं. So there are ways in which you brainstorm. There is a very famous image, ठीक है, जो यूपीएससी के लिए नहीं है, but it holds true for UPSC nonetheless. You know, this is all data. Think of these as your PYQ questions. ठीक है, for the last 5 years. Okay. I think no one in the, I think we can close the live.